What's up, everybody? This is episode 6 of the Happy Accidents podcast with Thunderthief. Today, we're going to be talking about my last song that I wrote for the record called Timeline. This track is the one that I wrote the fastest, and it was the last thing that I decided to put on this album. It just came from playing around on a guitar one day, and I was listening to just some old 90s pop punk stuff, and I was really just loving, there's this one band called Rufio, and they have such cool technical guitar leads, and I was just like, okay, what would happen if I wrote something that basically was a slowed down version of that? And that's how I came up with that first guitar riff. And as soon as I wrote that, I knew that I wanted to have just a really pretty chord that could sort of counter melody with it. And as soon as I wrote that next guitar chord, I knew, I was like, okay, cool. I can totally put a house beat behind this, and this is a great start. As soon as I got that initial first verse type of vibe going, I was thinking about just, honestly, my evolution as a musician and as a producer. Like, I came up in the pop punk world and the like metal emo scene, and I also grew up listening to like electronic music all the time. My older brother would show me like the Chemical Brothers and the Prodigy, and so I was always like fascinated with both of these worlds. And my entire producer journey and artistic journey, honestly, has been how can I combine those two in a way that like feels good to me. And having all that in mind for this track, I knew that I wanted to use a lot of real bass guitar and electric guitar as the foundations for a majority of the sections. And one of the things that's so great about the bass guitar is if you've played it for long enough, like there's people who always talk about, do I play with my fingers? Do I play with a pick? And the answer is whatever the fuck you want. If it sounds good, do it. And in that, like, you get just such a different tone from like how a string sounds being struck by a pick versus fingers. And that's one of the great things about like punk music is like when the bass is just cooking on some 16th note type of things with a pick, it's just this irrefutably awesome kind of aggressive sound. But to me, there's something really comforting about it. It's kind of like this low, pulsing chain to reality. Once I wrote that bass line, I threw the verse guitar chord into the synthesizer and was doing a little bit of sound design with it and came up with this sound. And it was with that, like, essentially that transformation that I was like, oh shit, I should just dig into all of the parts that I already have written and try to convert them into synthesized sounds and electric sounds and try to have them like appear in different parts of the song and hopefully vibe differently. And that's really what took this whole thing off. It's like, cool, it started here. How can it end? And what's that journey like in between? So after I sketched out the basic arrangement, I sent it to Jazz, and he was like, dude, I want to play drums on this so bad. And I had already booked all the studio time for drums that I had recorded for this album previously, and I knew that I wanted to get this song recorded soon and finished soon. So I It's like, well, fuck it, man. Let's just try to do it in your basement. This is our first attempt at recording in Jazz's place for my music, and I was so happy with like the tone that we were able to get out of his kit in his room, because it does have kind of like that basement garage type of feel that honestly I wanted in this song, because it gives it kind of that punk edge. And the parts that he wrote alongside that continuous bass, I was just such a huge fan of, and like that chord synth on top, I just thought it belonged together. And once we got towards the end of the track and it calms down and goes to like the bridge, and Jazz threw in these like children's choir samples, and we started to play around with how it felt just in that section. And as a result, we ended up taking a bunch of that and sort of spreading it throughout the song. So there is this like weird angelic innocence like sitting on the top of the track, but it's really like a bunch of kind of crusty, aggressive house punk dudes, and then this like really pretty children's choir on top of it. And so after that featured section, the end guitar part starts. One of the things I've noticed about my guitar playing is it's really influenced by monophonic harmonizations because of like my metal background, but also because my dad listens to the Eagles like all the time. And those guys are just masters of harmony in that regard. So a lot of my guitar parts, I kind of listen to them just solo, and I'm like, man, I think Don Henley would be pretty proud of this. And so this last guitar part is basically inspired by the Eagles and my dad just having this really nice harmony guitar just sail through the end. It becomes essentially the foundation, like the bass was in those rock breaks. And I like how a guitar can take over that role in certain parts. And at the end, we knew we just wanted to have something like big and epic. Like this whole thing feels like a rock show, and I definitely play it like I have a full fucking band behind me all the time, because it's just got that high energy. So having just that kind of stomp section, like the bass guitar is just on an open D, and there's just a bunch of like toms and everything's getting hit. Like we just wanted it to feel like this really physical and visceral punctuation, and I'm really happy with how it came out. Thank you for listening to this. Just a little side note, like today is April 7th, and this whole coronavirus thing is really doing a number on everyone. And I hope that at least with all this extra time, people are making the coolest shit they've ever made, so that at the end of this, we have a ton of great art, ton of great food, ton of great things that get to come out of it other than just us recovering from a pandemic. But thank you for listening. And here's Timeline.